Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here. And you guys remember when a sickness spread from a bat and this caused everyone to rush to try and find a cure, and everyone was just fighting with each other about the best way to manage and contain it? Obviously, I'm talking about Morbius, the new movie, the new kind of Marvel villain origin story featuring Jared Leto. Just hit theaters. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So I don't know anything about this character. I'm assuming he's a kind of a classic character, kind of a Spider-Man villain. I don't know anything, going into the film. I didn't know anything about who this guy was, the Morbius character. But like I said, the character himself, this movie is very simple. You have Jared Leto's character who's a doctor as a child born with a disease. I forget what the actual disease is, if it's a real one or a made-up disease, but that's slowly killing him. He can't walk very well, and he's bullied and kind of an outsider because of that. Sets him on this path to become a doctor and try and find this disease. Tries to take a wild swing at it by mixing a vampire bat DNA with human DNA. Turns out that was a bad idea, turns him into a vampire. And this movie basically is just Jared Leto trying to kind of contain this vampire power within him, this carnal primal thing where he just needs to drink blood and kind of what does he do with that? And it turns out that, hey, people say that, don't trust everything you read on the internet unless the internet is telling you that this is a terrible movie, because Morbius is not a good movie. This is one of the weakest, one of the worst movies I've seen, definitely this year, but maybe in the last couple of years. And it's almost like a throwback to, I think back in the day when comic book movies and stuff were kind of more of like a joke, and they hadn't really figured out how to make it like engaging movies and that weren't just super silly. And then Marvel came along and kind of came up with the formula and they learned a bunch of lessons over the last 10 or 15 years. Well, this movie takes all those lessons that we've learned and it ignores all of them, and it kind of gives you a very old school, kind of real cheesy, just not engaging film. And again, I don't think it's a problem with the actors. I'm actually I'm a bit of a Jared Leto fan. I think he's cool. I think he's a good actor in what he does, and he's fine in this. And even the other actors, Matt Smith is kind of his fellow kind of child friend that also suffers from the same disease, and some of their dynamic is interesting. This sort of their relationship. And Jared Harris, he's sort of like maybe not like an A-list actor. This is one of my favorites. He's been in a lot of cool stuff. He kind of plays like the doctor from the original hospital, kind of like a mentor figure. And he's really not in it as much as I think he should be. So the actors and stuff, they're fine. It's just that this movie has nothing going for it. The script oftentimes doesn't make any sense. It kind of changes the rules as it goes. It doesn't seem like it really knows what it's trying to be. Not a whole lot of like consistency with sort of what not like a cheesy, what's the moral of the story, but just as far as kind of like a unity of theme and kind of purpose and kind of some of the struggles of the character, it just doesn't really have any of that. And I think some of it is just, it's the problem with kind of this new wave of telling these like villain origin stories, where you're focusing on the villains of the story instead of the heroes. And there's some challenge, some hurdles you have to cross with that. I think you can. I think like the Joker movie, even if I wasn't as crazy about it as a lot of people were, the acting in that with Joaquin Phoenix and just the story it told, there was enough interesting stuff to keep you captivated, even though you're watching one of the villains in the story. And the problem with Morbius is that although Jared Leto's fine in the role, his character is not likable. He's not like you're definitely not cheering for him. He's a selfish character, but he's also just not interesting enough, like Joaquin Phoenix was, to keep you captivated. So you kind of end up with an hour and 40-minute runtime of just bad characters doing bad things, this kind of being selfish. There's no real like hope or, no like kind of light in this movie. And it is very kind of tonally, this is a very dark movie. It's a very grim movie. There's no humor in this movie. There's one character that I think they were trying to make like one of the cop kind of characters was supposed to kind of be the comic relief, but he wasn't very funny and he wasn't in it very much. So this is not like a movie that's going to make you laugh in any means, but even the darkness, like recent, like The Batman by Matt Reeves, that was a very dark movie too, but it was it was like a cool aesthetic of the dark, and they did a lot of kind of cool stuff and really immersed you in this dark, kind of almost like fantasy city of Gotham. And Morbius doesn't do that. This is just sort of like a glum movie. It just looks like normal, New York City or whatever city that they're in. It's not like a cool creative aesthetic. It's just all the scenes kind of happen at night. It's obviously very inspired, as you would expect about a movie about like a vampire villain, inspired by like the horror genre, and trying to be, it's not like super scary necessarily, but just sort of dark and kind of uncomfortable. And you see, this vampire characters that they're murdering people, and they're being bad. I would say, as I guess I know, probably one of the questions that will come up with this, at least for Christian viewers, is this is like a vampire thing. Is this like a some kind of satanic dark thing? It's very not that. The problem isn't that. I think even the vampire powers, those come from science. Those aren't things that come from like satanic powers or demonic rituals or whatever. He just kind of manufactures himself into a vampire. So it's not that. And I just like I said, this is an hour and 40 minutes runtime, which is maybe the best part about this movie. For once, a movie that is not over 2 hours, and it's definitely a movie that still felt long, even though it was a short runtime. By the end of this thing, I was just ready to be done. Even like some of the end credit stuff that people have been talking about on the internet, I didn't even stick around for that. I'll read it online. I was ready to get out of the theater. So just as a movie, this thing has very little going for it, and kind of almost showcases how far we have come in the genre from the dark days of comic book films. As far as content to be concerned about, or to be at least be aware of on the surface, there is a very unnecessary F-bomb. It's not like super, it's almost kind of said on the side, but there was no need to put that in, but it's PG-13 movie, so they could. And then just sort of a handful of other kind of minor profanities that are just scattered throughout this film. Violence, it is a violent movie. It is a PG-13 level of violence, so it's not necessarily like there's this blood and gore, like a chainsaw massacre or something, but characters do die, and it is kind of disturbing. And they get characters like get their throat kind of cut with the vampire claws, and vampires are biting into people, and there is blood, and you kind of see some of the aftermath of that. So it does have I would say there's more violence in this movie than you would expect in like an MCU movie or something like that. So be aware of that. And sexuality, there's none of that in this movie. There's even like there's not a whole lot of like romance or sex or skin or anything like that in that movie, so you don't need to be concerned about that. As far as kind of things beneath the surface in this thing, kind of worldview stuff, not a whole lot. This is not a movie that has going to cause you to go home and really think deep about stuff. And it in some ways it's trying to be kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde story, and is this kind of not successful in doing that, just because Jared Leto's character is not overly good or interesting of a person. But I do think, and I would say that, for the most part, I usually resist kind of forcing like cheesy Christian like allegory and stuff onto films. I prefer to kind of see what films say about like the real world and things, and not just try and make it have some Christian message that it doesn't have. But I do think that if this film has anything kind of to offer as far as like making you think, I do think that it kind of is just sort of looking at kind of fallen humanity, looking at sin. Kind of the passage that even came to mind when I was watching this movie is Paul, the Apostle Paul, when he talks about kind of being at war with his flesh, and where he talks in Romans, where he's talking about he doesn't do the things that he wants to do, and he does do the things that he doesn't want to do, and sort of that struggle. And this film kind of shows that, and you can definitely. Not that the film is trying to have that message, but you can see that, where you have Jared Leto's character, and he has this sort of like this darkness within him, sort of this like evil kind of sin within him, and the movie's kind of him battling against that, trying to kind of repress it, not let it out, trying to he wants to help people, but he also just has this like uncontrollable kind of deep rooted kind of just hunger for blood and to go do evil, and that is I don't think they deal with that in the film as successfully or interesting as they definitely definitely could have, but that theme is definitely there. And it's funny because even in the, like I said earlier, this is not a, his powers don't come from like spiritual stuff. It's not like a spiritual movie. It's more about like science and manufacturing this stuff. But the only times that kind of they do kind of allude to like spiritual stuff or like, religion or God is kind of in a jokey way. One of the cops, when they have Jared Leto's character in jail, comes and he brings like a little jar of like holy water with him for that kind of bad cop, good cop interview. And the other cop kind of, makes fun of the fact, like, what do you think that's going to do? And at another point, one of Jared Leto's, the female character that's sort of his partner, kind of doctor partner throughout the film, she's looking through his apartment and kind of sees like an open Bible. And, she's reading some stuff about it, kind of superstitious stuff about like a cross through the heart to get vampires, and kind of almost chides him like, hey, you don't expect that kind of stuff to actually happen. So I don't think it's a film that's like mocking religion necessarily, but it's interesting that it is a film that kind of deals with kind of this like sinful nature, trying to overcome the sin and just kind of on your own power, just gain control of yourself. And it kind of, any of the spiritual and kind of God stuff is sort of pushed to the side. We don't need that. We can handle that. And I do think that in some ways this film does kind of offer an interesting look at that, and just the fact that we can't save ourselves, from our own kind of sin, that we do need kind of an outside, a deity, a God to save us from that. So in the end, this is a terrible movie. This is not a movie I'm going to want to watch again. I'm already forgetting this movie, and I just saw it a couple hours ago. I definitely don't recommend it. I think I'm fine for the most part with like dark movies, and I think even as Christians, I don't think we need to be worried about darker movies. But I do think that if we're going to watch kind of these darker, violent or just kind of more gloomy movies, that they should be movies that kind of have some edifying value to them. And this film just doesn't have that. It was just, at least to me, just makes sort of the whole kind of, joyless experience just not worth it in the end. So I definitely don't recommend it. But hey, if you guys do see it, maybe if you're more, if you know the source material, the character, or you're just maybe more plugged into like the whole like crazy expanded kind of Marvel, even though it's Sony and the Spider-Man verse and however that all works, and maybe you found more to enjoy in this movie than I did. If you did, go in the comment sections and somehow explain to me where you found the enjoyment, because I didn't find it. But we'll love to have a conversation about that with you guys and just talk about movies. Hey, even the bad ones are fun to talk about. But if you haven't done so, subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. I got a lot of stuff going on. Hopefully some better movies coming up this summer to review than this one that we can kind of geek out about and talk about different Christian themes in. Like this video. But thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.